Next item, discussion by council vote or action on zoning ordinance amendment, section 5.4 district use, and section 5.7 solar photovoltaic systems. In one public hearing, is there a motion to open a public hearing? Motion by Mrs. Mosky, is there a second? Second by Mrs. Marvioli. Discussion? We'll call roll.
Mrs. Marvioli?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Hara?
Yes.
Mr. Richard?
Yes.
Mrs. Walensky?
Yes.
Mr. Rodney?
Yes. We do have an amendment to the zoning ordinance. Next, A, Code of Ordinance, Section 5, District Use Regulations, specifically 5.4 District Use and Section 5.7 Solar Photovoltaic System. We did have first reading on it with the changes that were sent to us from the town planner with input from the planning board. Mr. Kratz, would you like to start us off?
Yes, thank you. I'll be brief here. The changes, that's better. The real power of the changes that the planning board had put forth lie in that use table. And simply stated, when you're looking at accessory uses of solar, okay, that's what they call behind the meter use of solar for companies looking to change or reduce their power needs and how they pay for electricity. In those situations, the board felt that they would relax the requirements a bit instead of allowing it by a special use permit, which requires planning and zoning board review, allow it by right. This would be in instances like, let's say, off Industrial Drive, existing commercial sites. If they wanted to put in a small system to supplement their power needs, just go do it. Don't come to the planning board or zoning board. They felt that that was an incentive in that regard. You'll notice there's a small superscript 10 for the next use, which is the ground-mounted solar systems for commercial use in the BH. Planning board had a conversation about how would we feel if there were solar panels on the rooftop of Walmart, in the parking lot behind Lowe's, in front of Lowe's. Would that matter? They felt as though that in situations like a Dowling Village, perhaps they could put in panels as a matter of right without planning and zoning review. Now the idea there is to see if they can draw some of the attention away from the forest and towards existing built areas. Had a conversation with the town administrator today, which was very good conversation. And if you recall, I actually did a very detailed study in the economic development chapter that looked at every nook and cranny of commercial and industrial space you have left. It's kind of a manual exercise with GIS. But the planning and zoning board, if they bent over backwards and worked together to try to fill in every piece of land that's left in your manufacturing district, at best we're going to derive about $1 million in revenue from that going out over the course of X number of years as petitions came forward, should businesses look to expand or subdivide property or what have you. So a legitimate conversation needs to be had in terms of a policy decision as to letting that land potentially go for accessory use in the commercial zoning districts or go towards a use that's potentially building more buildings and creating jobs, which as a community, you're going to derive more revenue from that than just the tangible you get from solar. So that's your challenge now, is you have to decide which way you want to go with that. But one of my planning board members is here, Jeff Porter, if you had any questions for him. Otherwise, that's all I have to say on it at this time.
Why would you allow it by right in only those districts and not the others?
Well, again, the commercial districts being commercial, when you're driving by the industrial park and industrial drive, you maybe expect to see something industrial in nature like a solar array next to a building. But in the residential districts, the planning board was very clear. They didn't want to see people pushing solar, albeit as accessory use, to their neighbor's property and creating situations like that where maybe it's highly visible. They still want all the power to screen, keep solar out of view in all the residential districts. That's what the planning board was saying.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, I get that you're making it a right, but how much of the incentive is that really going to necessarily incentivize it? Because I know this is the debate at the state level, right? Is commercial versus forest land, and right now the real incentive is it's still cheaper to clear cut a forest, right? So what's going to make a Walmart say, well, that's great, I can put a roof, they still have to install it or upgrade their facility to be able to support a solar farm on top of it.
Of course. Well, you know, when you eliminate planning and zoning board, you obviously take months off the table, so time is an incentive. But I asked the developer of Dowling Village, Mr. Bucci, that very question. You know, and there's other solar experts around who probably answer to this, but when you're the accountants putting together all the tax credits and scheduling them and everything, you're right. I cannot tell you if the incentive is worth it to allow them to be able to just go for like a Walmart and just go see the building official. I can't answer the question. But I did ask the question, just like you did to me, of the experts. Will it be enough to, you know, do that? I don't know. Perhaps if communities went in that direction and relaxed their standards for big box, maybe the incentives are still there. So whether they're there for the forest or the big box, I don't think whether or not the property is developed as a bearing. I don't think.
Any other questions of Mr. Kravitz?
Mr. President, all right. As Mr. Kravitz indicated, we did discuss this today. I need to comment that I think this is going in the wrong direction. Most of the issues with solar installations become aesthetic. After you get by the tree clearing circumstance, the issue becomes aesthetics. And I think what the original committee work that was done on this by the what do we call the ad hoc ordinance development committee, thank you, was wise in allowing all of these in the zones as they are now by special use. To be able to weigh in or offer the opportunity to weigh in by planning with these circumstances. You know, our commercial installations are just as important as our residential. It's one community. Just because it's commercial, just because it's manufacturing, doesn't mean we should be, you know, putting solar panels in people's faces. We developed an ordinance that maximizes lot coverage, meaning how much you can put, or should it minimize it? I don't know. We set a max as to how much you can put on a lot. You own 30% coverage. We established good buffers in the ordinance to make sure that they weren't in line of sight. The original ordinance did a lot of work to make sure that these things were palatable, because they are necessary. We need the power. You know, we have 4 operating systems in town right now. I would venture to say that most people don't know they exist because they're well sited. Some of them did require trees to come down, yes, but they're well sited, they're quiet, they're of no nuisance value to anyone. In a commercial circumstance, if a carport type structure is installed and the panels block the view to all of the signage on the property, or to neighboring properties, who gets to say that that's okay, that you can block the line of sight to my sign, but not your own. I think the special use, the idea of trying to inspire development in areas that have pavement feels good. It's impractical to try to incentivize it in this way. I want to encourage that we maintain the special use permit. I think it's the wise way to do these things. They can go in a lot of places. They can be appropriate to many locations, but it should be allowed after they've been reviewed, not just based on, here's my plan for the building official, I want to install it. I think that's going in the wrong direction. As much as we need the power, I think that's wrong. If I can get to the footnote too, I wanted to comment on that one. We're talking about allowing things by right within developed portions of existing developed sites of 2 or more acres. As Mr. Kravitz indicated, and I'll go back to Councilman Smolinski's comment, we aren't making any more land. And the likelihood that we will be able to create more industrial land in particular is a circumstance that I caution that if we allow solar panels to eat up our existing industrial property, we have nowhere to put jobs, to put tax-generating buildings and income-producing jobs. That is just not the way to go. We went through this in the first round of creating an ordinance. We created a good ordinance, and I suggest to you that this is going in the wrong direction. There are other places that the culmination of this is the same thing. Even to the point of what trees can need to be replanted. In the special use permit circumstance, the planning board has the opportunity to request those circumstances as a condition of the approval. We don't have to get so specific that we create circumstances where people say just, forget it, not going on Smithfield. Not going to happen. I've got to find places to plant trees. It's just not going to happen. We need to look at these things individually. That's where the special use permit works very well. And I think the bottom line here is that we're reacting to a single circumstance of an overwhelming development by one proponent. And there was basis for it, where yes, we had this maybe win-win circumstance. All right, that's that property that was targeted was decided on more than one occasion. No, we're not doing that. We're not spending that much money for open space. But we have this leftover that is the approval of a zoning district that gives us a 40 megawatt system. We've got to live with that. On the other hand, it will be well buffered. It will be out of sight, generally speaking, and maybe some visibility from Route 146 perhaps. But I think generally speaking, you look at something that's going to be out of sight, it will still have general compliance with the original ordinance that was put in place. My point is that we can't just keep reacting to that. We've got to recognize that happened, it's done, and manage every bit of that as best we possibly can without allowing it to take over who we are. We've done this before when we had a power plant proposal and we came up with there was a survey that was circulated after that big argument, and we set direction for the community based on that survey. It was really just a reaction to that failed proposal, and we changed who we were, not smartly so, simply as a negative reaction to something that the community ultimately didn't like. And I think that's what we're doing here. I discourage there are there's some good language in here that certainly encourage. There are things we're talking about making the decision as approval or unapproval when there's profit involved. I don't know how you're going to get into a determination of what's profitable and what's not for profit in an ordinance without detailed definition of how that comes about. This is it's a bad reaction to an unfortunate circumstance. I caution your actions on it. Thank you.
We're in a public hearing.
We're in a public hearing. Is there anyone that wants to speak under the public hearing? When you come up, just state your name and your address, please.
Good evening. I'm Paul O'Sullivan, 665 Maureen Circle, Mapleville, Rhode Island. Tonight, I'm speaking on behalf of the Barrelville Land Trust. We're a private land trust, private all-volunteer, not-profit land trust in the town of Barrelville. We own 218 acres of land. I want to talk a little bit about, from the perspective of as a private landowner a land trust landowner in relation to the ordinance as it relates to tree planting, and there's a section in there about offsetting any destruction of trees to a 20-inch diameter and the replacement of those trees. I can tell you from experience, and I know you may have talked about this, and if you have, I apologize for repeating some of the things you may have talked about earlier or have discussed either with your town planner, administrator, or experts that have weighed in on this ordinance. From the perspective of tree thinning and replanting, I can certainly talk about that. Nature has its own way of doing its own planting. The idea of if you've ever been to a tree thinning property, you'll see that nature over the course of time will, and this is pardon me for the metaphor, but will weed out those particular species that can exist in that particular soil type at that particular time. The notion of the idea of finding a different property as your town manager has suggested for doing the tree planting may seem like an appropriate thing to do, but it really doesn't add to the existing ecology or tree canopy or character of a particular property. What might be a better approach is and this is a suggestion, something I did not see in the ordinance, is to do an assessment, do some type of assessment, I'll use the word assessment / inventory of what exists on the property before it's clear cut. Are there particular species, are there particular areas that do really well in particular places within that particular plot of land, whether it be 30 acres, 100 acres, 5 acres, doesn't matter. A forester would be able to do that assessment. Usually, we've had it done on all of our properties. We've had a forester come in, do an assessment of the property. It takes 1 to 2 days. The cost is anywhere between $400 and $1,200. You get a piece of paper which characterizes the layout of that particular land at that particular time and all of the characteristics associated with it. Most foresters can do many of these qualifications, these qualitative types of activities, assessments, online. They can do it with maps. And the ground truthing is done on a 1 to 2 day field trip to that particular site. So within the ordinance, it might be a good idea to incorporate some type of, you have environmental expert company. I would suggest that since you're clear cutting forest, that you add in there a forester who does forest management plans to give you an exact assessment of what that particular forest looks like. And then you can go out and look for something similar if you can find it, based on what that assessment, what that forest management plan actually tells you what exists at that particular time before those trees are cut down. A second item, and this will be the last thing I mentioned, is that there was a discussion about what to do with the money and I think it's in the ordinance as to levies and some type of tax treaty. Perhaps you do something similar to what's done on the federal level whenever there's any type of impact of either wetlands or forests. Section 404 of the Clean Water Act provides for a ratio of disturbed land to offset land. You can simply do a 1-to-1 ratio and have the developer go out and find the property, do the negotiation, buy the property, transfer it to the town. All of this conversation about where we're going to use the money for, how it's going to be, the developer takes care of that probably with the first year earnings or the first year monies that would instead of going to the town, would then go to purchase open space. You have a 1-to-1 offset, you have a forest management plan, you have a plan of attack in terms of creating open space and creating a solar array. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Jeff Porter, 6 Country Way, member of the planning board. I just wanted to come in front of you folks tonight to be able to stand here and ask any questions that you want to have with us. We did have to, I know you guys know the process that we've gone through, but we did have 2 workshops and we've had further discussion about the ordinance at our last meeting at the planning board. A lot of the discussion that we've had has been environmental impacts of these solar developments. There's been a lot of concern that's been brought before us about how clear cutting will actually affect the microclimates of the town, how that will affect all the way up from the fauna that passes through down to the pollination of the bees that will frequent these areas. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is actually come up and defend a little bit because it was put forth by my recommendation is that one-to-one replacement. What I was thinking of is not so much the economic impact that would be focused on this town, but the environmental impact. And I've been seeing a lot of developers coming from the planning board. They have these great plans, they have these great aspirations, these great promises, and that's all well and good, but I want to make sure that we're protecting our town from false promises. One of the things that I do as an architect is when I'm working